Hey guys, and welcome to the new episode of Full Funnel B2B Marketing Podcast. Finally, after 2 weeks of madness that was happening in Ukraine, I'm coming back and running today the episode for you with Parry, who is running Crackle PR. And I assume some of you guys know Parry from LinkedIn. He is one of the, or let's say I call him my go-to guy when it comes to all things related to PR. Today we are going to chat about B2B media machine. So basically, how can you build B2B media machine? We are going to chat about how to run PR engine, how to measure the efficiency of your PR activities, how to get featured in the top industry media. As always, you are welcome to join the discussion. You can ask your questions in the Zoom chat, or you are welcome to switch on your camera and ask your questions live. Up to you. And Parry, thanks a lot for joining me today. I'm super excited to nail down this topic with you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And obviously, we've been in the same circles for a while, and I've done a podcast with your partner, but it's good to connect with you. And before we start, I just want to say a word about Ukraine. I am praying, like everybody, for a speedy resolution to the horrible situation over there. So I know a lot of us are trying to do our jobs while thinking about that. So I just wanted to acknowledge that up front, that I and my family and everybody I know is praying that this thing comes to a speedy end. So with that, let's get to the matter at hand. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what Ukrainian president told, actually, I was reflecting on his words, right? And he is, if we can talk about this, he is doing the right PR at this moment. He is talking to the right people and he is promoting right things. And basically Ukraine is now being associated with European Union, getting support from entire world, right? So he is a good example. And basically what he said recently, he thought, look, if you can't do the work right now, please do it. Don't stop activities, right? Don't just suffer. Please do the job, because we need, we need the business going on. We need companies that might be able to pay taxes, etc. So that's why we also came back to a normal schedule, doing all that work. And recently, for you guys who didn't hear, launched a new initiative. In 2 weeks, we are going to launch Full Funnel Summit, where Parry as well would be one of the speakers. And this summit basically is free to attend. I will send you the link after the podcast, right? But we decided to sell the recordings and collect this money to donate to Ukrainian families as well. So if you would be down to support that initiative, you'll find a link in the email I'm going to send you after this event. But that was just a short teaser. So let's get back to the topic. I would love to ask you one straightforward question. Yeah. So what does it mean to have a media machine?
Well, to explain what that means today, I kind of have to take you back a little bit to what PR and media relations used to be. So, I've been in this business for 20 years, growing a couple of the largest privately held technology PR agencies in the country. And when I got started in this business, PR was a lot simpler. Sure, there are a lot of components like crisis communications and analyst relations and all of that. But when it came to telling a story, it was fairly simplistic. You'd work with a company, they would launch a new product. Maybe they would, enhance something quarterly, and you'd put out a press release. Even my firms were guilty of just kind of spraying and praying to a huge list of almost everybody that should care about that feature upgrade or partnership or whatever it was. And that some percentage of those people those reporters would write about it, right? So you could kind of bank on X percent of those people you reached out to would write about it. And then you could, build a clip book showing your client, or count the impressions, or the most sort of simplistic metrics, and report back to the client. And then you'd say, hey guys, what's next? What other news do we have? So it was really reliant upon the client being able to produce things for you to go to traditional media with, to try to get some results and some traction. And that worked fairly well for a long time. I mean, you know, when I started out, I moved to San Francisco in 2001. And I think my first client there with a company called Shift Communications was paying us $40,000 a month to do just that, just to take their news and pitch the media and keep that ball rolling. Interestingly, they were before Salesforce.com, but in the same space. No one knows about the company called Upshot that I worked with, but they were before Salesforce.com came in with Mark Benioff and started really telling a story that captured the imagination of everyone. So when you think about what a media machine is, I give you Mark Benioff as an example that I actually encountered, which is somebody that is able to kind of tap into the cultural zeitgeist and get all of your audiences, wherever you are, fired up about this one sort of rally cry or unifying mission. And so when I think of the companies today, they're doing a really great job of PR and communications. I think of the folks who are not just relying on pitching, you know, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Wired, Fast Company, but actually they're building communities all over the place, whether it's in Slack channels or Discord or Substack or LinkedIn. And in aggregate, if you're capturing those audiences wherever they live, that's what builds that halo effect over your brand. So I think there's a whole lot of B2B companies in particular that just aren't strong at telling stories because they communicate as if they're communicating to robots who are like purchasing agents, you know? So it's like they're standing atop Mount Olympus with flowing robes trying to sound really, really smart, when what they ought to be doing is talking to people wherever they are in a way that their grandma can understand. And I think the companies that get that, like the Gongs and the Drifts and those companies are going to win the day. And it's the ones that are still playing, you know, from the same playbook in 2010 that are having a lot of hard times right now, and their PR firms are pulling their hair out trying to make them happy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm wondering, let's say if you're going to join a B2B tech company and this company doesn't have a PR function, right? And let's say they have the right mindset. They want to do it the right way. So what are the first steps, right, to develop this function and build this media machine?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I've never been asked that way before. But I think that there's a truth that some PR firms probably are uncomfortable admitting, which is that you can actually do a lot of your own PR for yourself. So essentially, you can manufacture your own news. And what do I mean by that? I mean that you could get some group of people within the company, internal to the company, to dedicate themselves to posting content that they create with some consistency. Now, you have to figure out where your audiences live. In most cases, that's LinkedIn and Twitter and places like that. But they could be, you know, congregating in marketing channels on Slack or Discord or some other place. But the key is a willingness to create content that is not trying to sell your stuff to your audiences, but rather providing value to those audiences for free. You know, it's the metaphor I say is just ungate everything, ungate your brain, ungate it all, and just dump your wisdom into the places where your audiences are residing. And over time, what'll happen is that there's a compounding interest in people who just give you the damn information. Don't hide your pricing, don't gate your content, just like give it away. And the remarkable thing about that is that if you give it away, you get back what you give, which is everything. And I'm just, so if I were to start a new function at a B2B company, I would say first get your internal people lined up on what the mission is, and you can start doing some of that spade work in advance. And then when you start getting a little bit of heat and light and a little bit of engagement across those channels, then you've kind of already done some experimentation about what kind of things work. That's when you might want to reach out to a firm like a PR agency to say, like, okay, we have a pretty good start here. We kind of know what we're doing. Now we could get some professional help to really refine this and turn this into more of like a two-sided media machine where you, PR agency, are helping us produce content and disseminate that content. We internally are manufacturing our own news and content. And some combination of those two things is going to hit our key audiences wherever they live.
Yeah, I was just smiling when you mentioned Ungate and everything, because so many companies have this lead generation mindset, thinking in terms of MQLs, etc. So at this point, some lead generation marketers were thinking, "Hold on, Parry, but what about MQLs?" So
Yeah.
I'm just
we could do a whole separate podcast on that, but I think I think if you're reading the tea leaves, more and more companies are realizing that trying to gather leads for the sake of gathering leads is a fool's errand, and you should actually try to provide value to get highly targeted people who want to buy your product and services, because you've created the demand, right? You've created demand for what you're doing. So I think the model is flipped, and it should flip from hunting to gathering. Turn your company into a demand generation machine, and you never have to hunt again. You just have to figure out which opportunities are right for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. When we're talking about account-based marketing, quite often ABM knowledge is pretty limited with like, okay, so let's create a wish list of accounts, upload it to ABM software or LinkedIn, and, prospect target all these accounts with ads, right? Air cover program, and then reach out to all of them. But the truth is these accounts are not warmed up. There is no intent to buy, there is no demand, there is no awareness, etc. The clicks on the banners are not buying intent, definitely. The same like ebook downloads are not the leads that are going to purchase the product. And if you do exactly what you have mentioned, you create the right awareness, you create the right demand, because these companies are checking your website, maybe engaging with your case studies, right? Attending your product events, etc. So then you have an opportunity to start connecting with these people, and they are aware of what you are doing, of your messaging, of your positioning, and it's exactly the flipped model. So totally.
I think you're right. And just to kind of chime in there, so I'm not alone in thinking this way. Obviously, you guys philosophically kind of share this idea. Chris Walker is another guy who I really respect, and one of the things he talks about, which I couldn't agree more with, and I'm just stunned that people don't see this, is there's a fixation with these attribution models. So it's like, you go to the website, you hide the pricing, you do all these other things that are wrong. But on top of that, you try to find out where your people are coming from so you can attribute that lead. So you have a pull down menu of like 3 options. Did you see us at a trade show? Was it a webinar? No, it should be a blank field where you say what you did to find this opportunity, this company. Like, don't give them 3 choices, because there's probably 400 more choices in the dark funnel that they could pick from. Including seeing you on LinkedIn or a podcast or in a newsletter or wherever. So it's just a fundamental miss on the part of so many B2B marketing and sales groups. I just can't believe it. But to give you an example of how like I'm kind of eating my own dog food here. So Crackle is 16 months old. We're pretty new. And yet, we're almost at 2 million ARR. And I haven't spent a dime on marketing. I haven't spent a dime on ads. I haven't spent a dime on recruiting. And yet I have a full team and I have more clients than I can work at the moment. My biggest challenge is hiring more people. And I've done it by doing exactly what we're talking about today, which is being where our audiences are, providing value every day for free. And that magnificent turn of events occurs where if you give it all away, it comes back plus more. So I'm living what I'm preaching. And I think, there's no better indication that I'm believing what I'm saying.
And let me ask you a practical question. So now you have audience, right? And because like of the audience you have and because you are doing it daily, you see the compounding impact on your pipeline and revenue, right? But let's say if you are joining a new company, right? And you don't have this audience. So what are the right steps? How can you attract the attention of that audience?
Yeah, I think it's the answer is different than what people want to hear, which is that there's a quick fix or a quick way. There really isn't, unfortunately. It's like PR itself, where there is a compounding interest and it happens over time and it's not a light switch, right? But the best time to start was yesterday, and the second best time to start is today. And so you've just got to start. And I think one of the things that I counsel a lot of the folks in the C-suite at our clients is, you've got to get your executive team over the hurdle of realizing that when you publish on LinkedIn or other platforms, you're not going to immediately see a return on that investment. And that's not what it's about. This isn't about a way to quickly attribute a lead to your ROI. This is about trying to build a community or communities. And the only way you can do that is by being consistent with your voice and your content and just showing up day in and day out and providing value. So again, it's not the answer a lot of folks want to hear. They want to feel like, ooh, in 2 weeks, I'm already seeing amazing results. But the reality is you've just got to do the spade work, get out there and start laying the seeds for a future where you can build that community with that compounding interest. And once you do, it's crazy in terms of how you can get more followers and engagement and all of that. It's like almost doubles and triples once you get to a certain amount. In the same way, investing is like that. It's really very similar to the compounding interest of a 401k, for example.
And does it mean that you need to proactively grow your audience?
I missed that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, I mean, does it actually mean that you need to proactively grow your audience? Let's say you create an empty LinkedIn profile. You have 0 connections. Of course, you can find your former colleagues, right? Some peers, etc. But maybe your network will be limited by hundreds of contacts, right? So you don't have a big market to get this exposure and get this attention. So like, what should be the right approach in this case? Should you proactively reach out and connect with people? Should you start commenting, let's say, the thought leaders in your space? Or how can you attract the attention?
Now I understand. Yeah, it's a great question. And this one is actually hard for a lot of people, because the first hurdle they encounter is like, I have to post something. I don't know if I'm smart enough or if I'm valuable enough, but I know I need to post. So they finally post. But what a lot of people do is they fail on the more important step, which is actually engaging with people, not only in their own comment section, but on other people's pages and commenting on the things that they're saying that are relevant to you and your audience. And so what this really means is being like a good citizen. So if you think about going to like a party, for example, no one stands in the corner and declares something and hopes to like have people gather around and be friends. You have to go talk and get to know people and kind of work the room a little bit. And over time, everybody knows you, you know everybody else, and you start meeting new connections through those friends, etc. So I think it's really twofold. I think it's committing to publish your thought leadership or your industry expertise. And then I think it's a willingness to not only engage with the people who have kind of begun hanging out on your page, but go find the top 10 or 15 people that you think are super interesting and valuable to your communities and go engage with them, just authentically, honestly, not by trying to sell your stuff or putting links in their thing or tagging them, but just go engage with them and leave thoughtful comments and say, hey, great post. Have you thought about a different way to look at it, or whatever it may be? And those are the kind of things that, in addition to publishing, really begins to have a cascading effect over time.
And aside LinkedIn, so should you, let's say, what other channels should be in your media plan? So what other channels should you include for PR activities?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ones, and I think every company is a little unique, Andre. So there's some companies that probably don't need to be on Twitter, for example, but most B2B companies probably ought to be there. I think we're seeing more and more people that are on TikTok in B2B. And I think that is going to be even more true in the coming months and years as people realize that the engagement there is actually really spectacular relative to what we're seeing on other channels. And then some B2B companies even have a home on places like Facebook and Instagram. It just really depends on who the audience is, where they spend most of their time. And part of engaging with an agency is to figure out, to do that research about, okay, here our audiences are in these places. So let's focus here. Let's embrace these audiences and then extend beyond that over time. I think where a lot of B2B companies fall down when they're just getting started is they try to boil the ocean and be everyone and everything to everyone across all these channels. And it's really hard to do that really well across multiple channels, especially when you're in the A round of funding or B round of funding. You don't have all those resources in place.
Yeah, absolutely. But what about guest posts? Let's say on well-known industry media, does it still make sense to try, to connect with editors and publish guest posts to get this additional exposure, or it doesn't work anymore?
No, absolutely. Yeah. And so like for our clients, we have their content published on a variety of different places, bylines, contributed articles all over the place. And that's become a much more important piece of PR than it was in the past for a very simple reason, which is that there are far fewer reporters today than there were, 5-10 years ago. And reporters used to stay at the same publications and magazines for many, many years. But because that industry has just been rocked because of the ad model, reporters are bouncing around from place to place. Many of them have their own Substack newsletters now, and they're just getting out of the media game altogether. So you just have to really do a lot of legwork to figure out where you can place your content and who is most desperate for that content because they don't have sufficient editorial coverage to do it themselves. So the one way I like to think of it is if you do a good job by having really good content that you can place in these publications, they will come to you asking you for more content because they need to fill those holes to keep their ad dollars running. So that's when the magic happens is you do a really good job. You're not pitching them salesy, nonsense, but you're adding value to their audience. And if you do that really well and really consistently, you'll always have a home for your content, and you'll always be kind of helping that demand generation engine run.
Yeah, but I also see how it's correlated with the demand gen activities you have mentioned in the beginning, because the truth is, let's say you create this content on LinkedIn, on Twitter, doesn't matter which platform you'll select, right? You do this actively, you grow your audience, you being noticed, right? You create this awareness, and then it would be way easier to connect with these people because they say, oh, I know you because of your LinkedIn content, right? So
yeah,
then they see, they know if you write something for their media, it will be valuable, right? Because they know you because of your content. And it's completely different. For example, we are hosting podcasts, right? Which we are doing right now. And every week, I'm getting called like 2-3 cold pitches of, hey, Andre, would you like to feature this guy? Would you like to feature this guy? He's a fantastic entrepreneur, so just invite him. Of course, I never accept any of these pitches because I have zero idea who these people are. I have never seen them, right? And completely different, I know, when people are engaging, like we engage with each other on LinkedIn. I know you, right? And I know that everybody who is listening to us live right now, everybody is getting value of that conversation. So completely different story. So my question is, who should be involved in these PR activities or demand gen activities? Do you think that C-suite should be involved, or marketers, or sales, or everybody?
The short answer is that if you're asking me who should be involved, the short answer is everyone. The more realistic answer is people who opt in to help. So what I've found working for a dozen different B2B companies and helping them kind of figure out what they should be doing and on what channels is that if you try to mandate it or make everybody do it, you're going to fall down because a lot of people aren't comfortable with it. They've never been comfortable with it, and their copy and their content will reflect that. It'll be just kind of weak, uncompelling, unconvincing, uninspired stuff. So a much better approach is to figure out who is going to raise their hand and volunteer to help that mission. And ideally, some of those people are at the top of the organization. And that could be, and I hope it is, the CEO, the CMO, the sales leader, and then whoever's running demand or demand gen at that company. Those people at the very least. And what tends to happen if you get those folks publishing content across the right channels with some consistency is that people who aren't doing it are conspicuously absent, and they start saying, if my leadership is doing this, like maybe I should consider doing this too. And I think that's really the wonderful thing is you almost gamify it a little bit, where if you lead by example at the top, the rank and file tends to fall in line because they realize there's something to this. Now, one more thing I will say, I think a lot of B2B companies in particular fall down by limiting or having too many rules around what their employees can and can't do on social channels. I think those days are fast fading. I think that the people who set their people free, just like they set their content free, are going to have the halo effect on their brand much faster, because guess what? If your employees are building their own personal brand on LinkedIn, talking about what they know about your industry, they're also building your company's brand and the halo effect on your brand by having your best people saying smart things about your company. So it's okay. Your employees will probably leave in 2 years, 3 years, whatever. You're not going to be here for life. Build your own brand and at the same time, by extension, build ours. And that's a really hard leap for a lot of people to make. They're so concerned that your employee maybe says the wrong thing or pisses off a customer. But I think that's really kind of an old approach to being out there and evangelizing for your company. Sure, give them some guardrails. You know, if there's a couple things that they can't say or it'll sink the ship, then let them know that. But by and large, set them free, let them strut their stuff. And in aggregate, that halo effect you all are building for your brand is far worth any potential risks that you might encounter.
Thank you. Madison asks, how do you organize your content database? How don't you lose your best ideas and have an easy way to reuse them?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways to approach this. There are some people I know that that write like batch content, for example. They'll sit down for a day and pound out a bunch of different posts and blog posts and LinkedIn content. And a lot of our clients do that too. And so we can help them kind of calendar that stuff out and hit like on the key pillars that they want to talk about organizationally, and manage that whole program from soup to nuts. Me, I am not that way. I am very much a person who I wake up in the morning. Usually I have 2 or 3 thoughts in my head while I'm sleeping, and I'll wake up and one of the first things I'll do is pour a cup of coffee and just pound out a post on whatever's on my mind that day. I know that that's not usual, but I'm also somebody who comes from a writing background. I used to be a reporter. So for me, it's not work. It's like, I have to get this stuff out of my head so I can go function. So I'm a little bit different than the average bear, but I think there's no right way. The only answer to what's the right way is to make sure you're consistent with your content, whether you schedule it out in advance or whether you don't. Now, as for repurposing content, I am a huge fan of repurposing your best content. I did a LinkedIn post the other day saying basically that not using your best content is like buying a kick-ass outfit, wearing it once and then throwing it in the trash. You wouldn't do that. It's a great outfit. You look killer in that outfit. Use it again. Just like space it out a little, you know? So maybe it's next month you go to your cousin's wedding. Maybe it's, 2 months from now, you go to a different event where you can bust out that outfit and look great. Same thing with your content. So you keep your best content in a little file somewhere, and maybe using tools like Shield on LinkedIn, which is an analytics app, which content performs best. And you just put a little star next to those. And if you get in a pinch and maybe you have a writer's block, you bust into that content closet, grab one of your best performing posts, tweak it a little bit so it's slightly different. And guess what? It'll perform almost as well as it did the first time, and sometimes even better.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea. We're also big fans. We're doing this at Full Funnel. So we have weekly newsletter, and every week we check our top performing post, and then we just adapt it to newsletter, add in some more details, maybe add in some more links that are leading to different podcast interviews that we have done in the past, maybe some case studies, some blog posts, etc. And people love it. So it's growing, and just the same, like you mentioned with the audience, in 1 year, we grew our newsletter to almost 10,000 subscribers without ever promoting it. And basically people are just resharing it, with their peers, with their colleagues. So, and it's purely based on our LinkedIn content. I don't create something unique. I just use our top performing posts, tweak them, adapt to newsletter, and share with the audience.
Can I just say something? So you guys do a particularly good job. So both you and Vladimir do a really good job of having various playbooks that you are publishing almost every day, showing people basically how to do what we're talking about today. So I think of all the people that I've seen in the marketing and sort of sales and demand gen ecosystem, I think Chris Walker and I think you guys are probably the best that I see at consistently being there, giving away your value, just like I talked about, ungating your brains basically and dumping it all out there. So I think, kudos to you guys. It's something to behold, and I'm not surprised at all that you are growing organically and you're not having to over promote your stuff. I'm not surprised a bit.
Thank you. One quick question. People always ask, it's how do you measure the efficiency of demand gen? Because we spoke about attribution, right? You won't be able to have this linear funnel basically and expect that you post, let's say, 5 times per week and you get 1 opportunity. No way. So basically, how do you measure the efficiency of your demand gen / PR programs?
Yeah, so there's a couple things I think that need to be considered here when you talk about measuring. Some of it is concrete and some of it is a little more abstract, so there's dark funnel stuff. So I'll give you an example, just for me and what's worked, and that is typically because of what I've been doing to kind of build demand, the CMO or maybe VP of marketing, maybe director of comms will reach out to me and say, hey, I'm seeing your content everywhere. It's really resonating with me. You seem to be philosophically aligned. Like, let's hop on the phone. We're looking for a PR agency. And by the time you actually meet for the first time and have that conversation, they're already kind of 70% sold, because they know how you think, they know what you how you view PR, they know your ethics, they know what you value, they know your voice, they know all that stuff. So the meeting and the contracts is almost like a formality. Whereas in the old days, before the demand game, you'd have to go through a million dog and pony shows, presentations, just like on and on and on, sales cycles forever. So that's kind of like one way that I'm measuring it personally. But when you're talking about a B2B organization measuring the effectiveness of a PR program, I think there's a number of things you can do, including things like share of voice, including, whether it's positive, negative, or neutral coverage. And I think there's a way to tap into your analytics on the back end, your HubSpot stuff, to see kind of where leads are coming in from. And then specifically to that attribution piece, I think B2B companies do a terrible job of identifying where the leads come from, as I already mentioned, right? By giving you only a few things to choose from. You don't really see much beyond like, trade shows, awards, seminar, that kind of stuff. But what you don't see is like, media relations or from social channels or any of that. That's why I really advocate that blank field, so that people can just tell you. You don't guide them, they guide you and tell you where they see your stuff. So Chris Walker just yesterday was talking about that, and he showed examples of people coming in on that field. It was like, I saw you on LinkedIn. I heard you on a podcast. Like all these different places that B2B companies aren't measuring, because they don't have that as an option on their pull down menu. So it's a combination of actual hard data and hard analytics via different tools like Cision and Talkwalker and all these things, plus some of the more sort of ethereal ways of gathering that information from the dark funnel, like having those blank forms. And some combination of those two things tends to really inform what's working and what's not working over time.
Yeah, I love it. And basically what we also love to measure, we just have these weekly pillars to track our engagement. And what we love to measure is basically on a monthly basis, how many media opportunities did we generate? Basically, if people invited me or Vlad to the podcast, to speak at the conferences, etc., right? Because it gives us additional exposure. That's one metric. Of course, inbound opportunities, that's pretty predictable. And at the same time, we have one more metric that we love to track. We have our list of target accounts, because we speak a lot about account-based marketing, right? And we just track the engagement from target accounts. We check if they are visiting our website, if they're engaging with our core case, ABM case studies, if they're checking our service page, right? And if they consume our LinkedIn content. So these are the most important metrics that show us the account engagement. We have a question from Flavia. Flavia, please go ahead.
Hello, everyone. How are you? Can you listen to me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Oh, great. So first of all, thank you for this amazing podcast. Barry, we have spoken, I'm sorry, English is not my mother tongue. So if
That's okay. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. We have talked about the PR practice sometimes on LinkedIn. I would like to first and foremost thank you. I appreciate your content sharing on LinkedIn. You have no idea how much you've helped me. I was working at a B2B tech, and I used to use a lot of your content to help me do my job. But when you were talking about the way you write your content, when you wake up in the morning and then you just have these thoughts and then write about it, do you worry about SEO, or you just go with the flow?
I just go with the flow, truly. I came from an agency world where it was a bit different than the agency that I'm building. My agency is built 100% on transparency and honesty. Not that my other agencies weren't honest, but it's just that now that I own my company, I'm not worried about somebody firing me or telling me what I can and can't say. So that's point number one. And point number two is that I'm not interested in gaming the system for SEO. I honestly think that everything else pales in comparison to leading with what you're actually thinking and providing value every day, period. So I don't try to like map it to the SEO game. I don't care about that. And if I ever get to the point where I need to start doing that, then I think I'm failing. I think I'm in a situation now where I've never been before in my career, which is that 100% of the things that come into me are because people read my thoughts and respect my thoughts. And that's a pretty great place to be. So I don't see that changing. And every day is a new day, and I'm just going to lay it out there like I actually think.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words.
Oh, thank you.
And also what is nice in that approach, right? Because you think about the value your audience will get first of all, right? You focus on value, and basically this creates the demand, not SEO. SEO, from my point of view, if you are not selling commodity service, if you are not like e-commerce shop that is selling soap and shampoos, etc., then you don't need to care that much. Think about the most important topics or questions your audience has, write about this, and then think what potential keyword you can add or embed to your content, right? Otherwise, I think if you put SEO first, this approach is doomed.
Let me give you an example of when I tried to use SEO to help, and it actually backfired. So if you've been following me at all on LinkedIn, you know that I constantly am talking about how the RFP process is just fundamentally broken and a nightmare for everyone. So what I tried to do was say, maybe I can get more attention to my website if I create a template for RFPs that's easier and better, try and make the system easier, and then map it with SEO and just kind of really work it that hard. And maybe that'll give us a lift. And that was in the first couple of months of starting the business. Well, it worked. And I got a lot of people sending me RFPs that I don't want because they're a pain in the ass and they take like hours and hours and hours to do. I actually don't want RFPs. I want them to go away forever. I want them to die a cruel death. And what I want instead is to have a conversation with somebody who saw what I was thinking about and wants to talk through it versus having me fill out, 4 days worth of nonsense that's going to take my team's time and attention. So SEO in that sense totally backfired, and I started getting much more of the kinds of opportunities I did not want. So that kind of told me that I think I'm doing that wrong. I think I don't need to be optimizing for it because I'll get more of what I don't want and less of what I do.
Love it. Basically, same feelings around it. We have 2 more questions from our community. Shane asks, do you have any best practices around how to build an internal mindset around content development / storytelling? Like you mentioned, I have found people who opt in often are most engaged and have good ideas for content. Still, I think this concept is still new for people outside of PR, and most think of communications as press releases. How can you build this shift in mindset with your business teams in order to identify engaging content and stories?
That's a great question, really great question. I think the answer is it's a little bit of a process, especially for those who are newer to this whole kind of demand game and putting yourself out there and sharing content. So I think part of that is education. And I think a way to do that is to show good examples to the C-suite of companies that are doing it successfully now. So that's kind of point 1. Point 2 is that there are ways of kind of gamifying this process so that it becomes less painful for people and a little more like competition. So as an example, I mentioned Shield app earlier. Which is a way of measuring the analytics on your posts and your engagement and what days of the week it works best and which content performed the best. So if you get an account and have everybody that's participating on LinkedIn, for an example, plugged into the Shield app, you can actually see who's getting most engagement of the 4 or 5 people that maybe you have. And that becomes fun. And then you start having almost like bragging rights, like, look at my post on Thursday, I crushed it. And we got, a bunch of inbound from that or whatever it may be. So there's ways of educating and then also gamifying and trying to make it more fun, like a friendly competition. I think those 2 things in the early days tend to work. But what I think works best is once you start getting success tends to beget success. So once you're out there and there's a regular cadence and people are starting to get inbound queries, whether it's from a new candidate or from a new partnership or potentially a new client, that's when the light really flips and people are like, they're coming to me. That's interesting. They're coming to me now. And when that happens, it's usually off to the races and everybody gets on board because you can't argue with the results, right? So it's an iterative process. You have to start slow with education some clever tools to help kind of get people on board. And then once results start coming in, you don't have to sell it anymore. It's selling itself.
Nice. Another question is coming from Dimitri. If product very specific to a localization, originally it's English localized, but it's simple to scale technically. So different languages could become an issue. How to act properly? So if I understood it well, basically it means, let's say if you are selling to different markets, right? And your primary language is English, but basically you can scale in Germany or France, which is conservative markets, right?
Yeah.
What would be your approach in this case?
Yeah, so we're based in North America, and we have a network of agency partners all over the world. And so I think if we're talking about a global B2B company with, you know, whether you're in EMEA, Asia Pac, like no matter where it is, you need to partner with people who are experts and local to that region, because you don't want to mess things up in terms of translation, local differences and nuances. So if I understand your question correctly, I think what you're saying is how do you scale globally? And the answer is you find partners in those regions to work together with you. So for example, we have some international clients, and what we tend to do is help them identify which partners, which PR partners overseas would be the best fit and most closely aligned with us. And then we'll either run the whole program and kind of set up weekly meetings and make sure everybody is on the same page, or we'll acquiesce if they have a team that they want to run over there, then we'll just kind of be in the passenger seat and just feed them information they need. So I don't know that that's a really great answer for what you're trying to say, but I do know that like we're good in our region, we're not good in others, so we need to partner with people who are.
Yeah, love it. And quick question coming from my side, guys. How was this episode for you? Was it insightful? Did you learn something new? Let me know in the comments. And meanwhile, a short spoiler. Again, in the beginning, I mentioned our full funnel summit, right? So we are going to host it in 2 weeks, and Parry would be one of our keynote speakers. So if you guys didn't sign up yet, here is a link in a just a second. I will drop this link in a Zoom chat so you can get your free ticket. And let us know how was this episode for you. Did you find it valuable? Just type a short feedback in the comments, please. And I would love to ask probably last question. What are where basically people should follow you? LinkedIn, website, newsletter?
Yeah, LinkedIn and Twitter are the 2 places that I roll most often. So P Headrick on Twitter, and Parry Headrick, P-A-R-R-Y, Headrick, H-E-A-D-R-I-C-K on LinkedIn.
Thank you. Thank you. Also, guys, thanks a lot for great questions. It was really nice discussion. I love our community. Yeah, thanks a lot for the feedback. I'm happy to hear that it was valuable. I am reading your comments in a Zoom chat. So I will see next week. We are going to host one more podcast episode before the full funnel summit with Amanda from Spark Toro. So again, you see it's aligned with content, right? Again, and in 2 weeks, you'll have a chance to meet Parry again at Full Funnel Summit. Have a great rest of the week and talk to you soon. Cheers.
Thanks, everybody.